Democrats officially took control of the House. They passed a package of bills that would end the shutdown, but without money for the border wall. The president promised a veto, of course. Joining me now to discuss is James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence. Director, thank you so much for joining us. Good evening to you.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been on many times. You've expressed a lot of concern about the behavior of this president and his impact on this country. Do you think the Democratic Congress will provide a much-needed check of this president, or do you think that idea is overrated?
Well, they could. I just hope the Democrats manage their oversight and not just throw everything on the wall and hope something sticks, but pick some priorities, some things that should be done on a priority basis by, the key oversight committees, and to think through. And it would be useful on the part of the Democrats if they coordinated among themselves, so they deconflict. And so I think, yes, the potential is there, but I think it's very important that it be managed.
Don't overplay your hand.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sources tell CNN that President Trump received another letter from Kim Jong-un, which he reportedly tossed at Senator Chuck Schumer at that meeting yesterday. The last time Trump got a letter from Kim, he said this. Watch, here it is.
When I did it, and I was really being tough, and so was he, and we would go back and forth. And then we fell in love, okay? No, really. He wrote me beautiful letters, and they're great letters. We fell in love.
I don't know why that song of Fine Romance just popped into my head, but anyways.
Yeah.
I'm showing my age now. Is the president confusing nice letters with concrete steps towards denuclearization?
Well, of course. I mean, Kim Jong-un he's playing President Trump like a fiddle right now, and in the meantime, what Kim Jong-un is doing is de facto he is a nuclear state. North Korea is a nuclear state. And every day goes by that de facto situation continues. He's getting closer and closer to being de jure, which is what he wants. And the North Koreans are not going to denuclearize. And in his New Year's Day address, he laid out some pretty stiff conditions before they'll consider denuclearizing. So the approach we're taking, not going to work. And if they have another summit, that's great. But Kim Jong-un is not term limited, and he's got about 40 years of youth.
But there could be another summit, because sources are telling CNN that the Trump administration is scouting locations for a second summit with him. Do you see any reason to hold another summit at this point?
Well, I really don't, unless it's a do-over. I wish that President Trump had asked Kim Jong-un, because first chance we've had in the history of the Kim family, decades, where we could hear it from the horse's mouth. What exactly is it that you need so that you don't need to rely on nuclear weapons for your security? And that's where, to me, the discussion ought to start with the North Koreans. I don't know how you map out a negotiating strategy when we don't really know that. And it might be very interesting and instructive to hear what the response would be. So maybe this will be a do-over, and they'll get a chance to do that, and also agree on what denuclearization means. And as we're hearing, and as I've said before on your show, for the North Koreans, denuclearization is a two-way street. It applies to us in their mind, not just to them.
Yeah. I just a letter, dear Mr. President, at long last. So listen, the president had some bewildering comments about Russian history yesterday. Here it is.
Russia is there. Russia used to be the Soviet Union. Afghanistan made it Russia because they went bankrupt fighting in Afghanistan. The reason Russia was in Afghanistan was because terrorists were going into Russia. They were right to be there. The problem is it was a tough fight. And literally they went bankrupt. They went into being called Russia again as opposed to the Soviet Union.
Did that make any sense to you? Was any of that factual? Seriously?
Well, some of it was kind of semi-factual. The business about, I mean, I'll give them the confusion that many people have about Russia versus the Soviet Union. Well, Russia is a shadow of what the Soviet Union was, and about half the population. So there's a big difference between Russia and the Soviet Union and all the other Soviet republics. The Russians were in Afghanistan not because of terrorism, but because they just wanted to dominate Afghanistan. That's all it was about. And for him to say that it was entirely appropriate for them to be there is incredible, in light of the fact that we were helping the Mujahideen, who later morphed into the Taliban, to get rid of the Russians. So it's an interesting interpretation of history, I'll put it that way.
That is a very generous response. Thank you so much, Director. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Don.
It's a new day in Washington. The Democratic majority in the House, and President Trump already wrangling for control. Who will come out on top?
I'll be right back. With moderate to severe Crohn's disease,
back up the passage.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Barack H. Obama.
My first assignment was some cleanup for the 64 Civil Rights Bill. We did the 65 Voting Rights Act, the 25th Amendment. That's when the Congress actually worked and was very effective. So I know the body can work. And I have, as a Republican, watched the Republicans absolutely destroy the government processes. So what's going to happen with the Democrats taking over is they are actually going to start digging in to the departments and agencies where there has been lots of malfeasance, nonfeasance, and misfeasance that really needs to be, the pitiless light of publicity is what needs to be shown on this administration, because Trump has really created a new swamp.
I wonder what the reaction is going to be. Is it going to be more digging in from this president, more misstatements, and from his supporters and from the conservative media?
I think you can take what he's done with the Mueller probe and multiply it by about 7 or 8, because that's how many committees will be after him, and he's not used to that kind of attacks. Now, there's something of a myth about subpoena power. There really are not a lot of remedies when a president who has the deep pockets of the Department of Justice starts fighting subpoenas. People outside the government, they're very vulnerable to subpoenas and generally have to comply. But a government official, a department head, an assistant secretary, a White House aide, they can really put off subpoenas for a long time.
The chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, says that he is preparing for a vote to hand over committee transcripts to Mueller. Give me, what's the significance of this?
Well, Mueller needs the originals of all transcripts, and he apparently hasn't even seen all transcripts. We know earlier he was given the Michael Cohen transcript, but he needs these for purposes of presenting the raw evidence to the grand jury, and he also wants to look, I would think, at people who have been in front of that committee who may or may not have always been truthful. It'll give him added leverage and could open up some other avenues for his investigation.
Not only do they have subpoena power, House Democrats potentially have the numbers to impeach the president. There's a piece in the LA Times titled 2019 will the worst year of Trump's life and it says this: will it be the worst year of Trump's life? And it says this: some presidents have really bad years. For Nixon, it was 1974, the Watergate year, which ended with his resignation. For Clinton, it was 1998, the Monica year, which culminated with an impeachment trial in the Senate in 1999. He won that vote easily and came out more popular than before. It's a good guess that Donald Trump's really bad year will be 2019. So what do you think? Is 2019 going to be the 1974, or I don't know, maybe it'll look like 1998?
It has that potential. When Trump came into the press room today at the White House and gave a nice little nod to Nancy, I thought, I flashed on the fact, here's a man who really has no philosophy. He has no loyalty. He's a total opportunist. He could jump on the Democrats' bandwagon and try to do things with them and actually get something accomplished. Whether he'll do that or not, I don't know. But he could try to actually broaden his base and play president. I don't know if he's keen enough to do that.
You're so smart, John Dean. And the reason I say you're so smart is because I thought the same thing. I said maybe his best option, instead of appealing to such a small group, their rabid supporters, would be to work with the Democrats. And then it's a much larger tent. He has maybe a better chance of being reelected and gaining some new supporters. I don't know, because the old supporters will just stick by him and say, hey, listen, he was doing what he had to do, and he doesn't really believe. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yep, you and I were thinking very similarly. Yep.
Yeah, because all he'd have to do is spin it to them, and they would believe it. Yeah.
We'll maybe play this back in a year and see what it looks like.
Quickly, before I let you go, I just want you to listen to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi when she was asked about impeachment this morning. Here it is.
Many Democrats are talking about impeachment. You've said it would be sad and divisive for the country to pursue impeachment. Mm. Are you willing to rule it out?
Well, we have to wait and see what happens with the Mueller report. We shouldn't be impeaching for a political reason, and we shouldn't avoid impeachment for a political reason. So we just have to see how it comes.
But any of the many investigations against President Trump, we're talking not just the Mueller investigation, but the Trump Foundation, the emoluments case, the SDNY case against Michael Cohen, any of them could reveal high crimes and misdemeanors. What happens if something explosive comes out?
It could happen, Don. With the Nixon's case, it was the explosion or the implosion of his actions in firing the special prosecutor. With Clinton, his impeachment really was a calculated political move that backfired by the Republicans. They tried to build a case. Ken Starr came up in an unprecedented manner as an independent counsel and tried to sell the committee on an impeachable obstruction of justice and failed in the Senate. It was an embarrassment. A lot of people lost their jobs, and the Republicans got wiped out as a result of it. So I think that was the lasting lesson, is you have to be very careful. With Nixon, they proceeded very carefully, but never actually got to an impeachment vote. He resigned before that happened.
John Dean, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Don.
Trump administration scouting locations for a second summit with Kim Jong-un. Are talks with North Korea basically back to square one?
I'm Ken Jacobus, and